Hey everybody, this is Unit 1, Formative 1, Day 3. We're going to talk about addition and subtraction, multiplication and division again, except now we're going to add some fractions into the mix of it. And before we even start, don't get overwhelmed. You've seen this before, we're just doing a little refresher. Alright, first of all, some things that you may already know, but we want to talk about before we actually get into doing the math about fractions. The numerator is typically, is always the top of the fraction. The denominator is always going to be the bottom. Okay, and you will hear me use those two terms, so get used to them. All right, a mixed fraction is, let's say we have 2 3/5. Okay, that would be a mixed fraction. And what we're going to want to do is change it to an improper fraction. So when we do that, we're actually going to take the 2 times the 5, so that gives me 10. Okay, I'm going to add the 3, which is on top, so that gives me 13. So my numerator is going to be 13. My denominator stays the same, which is that 5 right on the bottom there. Okay, so if I want to change that mixed fraction to an improper fraction, I'd get 13 over 5. Multiply 2 times 5, add the 3 to get 13 over 5. Okay, and the reason we do that is because we will always be working with improper fractions in here unless I tell you otherwise. So an improper fraction is simply where the numerator is greater than the denominator. Or the top is larger than the bottom. Okay, so now that you know these 4 terms, let's actually start doing subtraction. Okay, when we add and subtract fractions, we want to have a common denominator, which is the bottom of the fraction. So in this first example, we have a common denominator of 7, meaning the denominator is the same in both fractions. So in this case, it's real easy. All we have to do is add the top 2 numbers together. So 2 plus 3 gives me 5. And we keep the denominator the same. So 5/7 is what 2/7 plus 3/7 would be. Okay. Number 2. All right, now we're actually going to subtract them. Subtraction works exactly the same way as addition, except we have a subtraction sign. So we look at our denominator, and our denominator is the same. We both have a 4, so we're good to go. So we're actually just going to take 3 minus 1 this time to give me 2. Remember, keep the denominator the same, so 2 over 4. Okay, well, in the last example, we couldn't simplify our fraction at all because there was nothing that went into 5 and 7 besides 1. Okay, whereas if we look at this example, we get 2 over 4. Well, what number could go into 2 and 4? Well, we could divide them both by 2. So I'm going to take 2 divided by 2 and 4 divided by 2 because I'm simplifying my fraction. So I'm going to get 1 over 2 is my final answer. Okay, so 2 over 4 is only partially right. You need to simplify your fraction for your final answer. Okay, so here are a couple examples of addition and subtraction where the denominator is not the same. Okay, so that means we need to find a common denominator between 5 and 10. Okay, well, if we look at some multiples of 5, we have 5, 10, 15, and so on. If we look at multiples of 10, we have 10, 20, 30, and so on. Okay, well, the least common multiple, or the least common denominator, is 10. Okay, so we're going to change the first fraction to have a denominator of 10. And since 10 is our common denominator, the second fraction stays exactly the same way it is, 7 over 10. Okay, well, to get from 5 to 10, what did I do? Well, I multiplied by 2. Okay, so that means I'm also going to multiply the top by 2. So 2 times 2 gives me 4. And now, if you look, I have a common denominator. All right, so now I can add my fractions together. 4 plus 7 gives me 11 over 10. And that would be my answer. Remember, we're going to leave it as an improper fraction where the top is bigger than the bottom. Okay? All right, and then finally we have Another one where we have 5 and 3 is our denominator. So once again, we need a common denominator. So if we look at multiples of 5, we have 5, 10, 15, and so on. If we look at multiples of 3, we have 3, 6, 9, 12, 15. Oh, and if we look, we have a common one right there. So our common denominator is going to be 15, which means in both fractions now I'm going to make the bottom 15. Okay? Well, let's look at this. What did I do to get from 5 to 15? I multiplied by 3. So that means I also need to multiply this 2 by 3 to get 6 on top. And what did I do to get from 3 to 15? Well, I multiplied by 5. And so that means I also need to multiply this 2 by 5 to give me 10. Okay, so now I have a common denominator, so I'm good to go. 6 minus 10. If you remember from yesterday, we're at 6, so we have $6, and we owe somebody 10. So that means that I am now $4 in the hole, so negative 4 over 15. Okay, so 6 minus 10 is negative 4. That's where the negative 4 comes from on the numerator. All right, and then finally we're going to multiply and divide fractions. Multiplying fractions is one of the easiest things you will ever do. Okay, simply we're going to multiply the tops together. You don't need to worry about a common denominator. We're going to multiply the tops together to get 6. We're going to multiply the denominators together to get 20. Okay, so multiply across the top, multiply across the bottom. All right, if we look, 6 and 20 can be simplified. They both divide by 2, so that gives me 3 over 10 as my final answer. Remember, simplify your fractions if you can. Okay, division isn't as bad either. We're going to keep, change, flip. Okay, so we're going to keep the first fraction the same. We're going to change the division sign to a multiplication sign. And we're going to flip the second fraction to 6 over negative 5 instead of negative 5 over 6. Okay, now we have a multiplication problem just like number 1. So we're going to multiply across the top to get 12. We're going to multiply across the bottom to get negative 15. And if we look, okay, they both have a common factor that we can pull out so we can simplify this fraction. If we divide by 3, we're going to simplify that fraction to 4 over negative 5. And the negative sign can be on the top or the bottom or out in front of the fraction. It does not make a difference. Okay, and that is how we multiply, divide, add, and subtract fractions. Do not forget to take your quiz back on my website. We will see you back in class.